I woke up to an eerie silence, the kind that clings to you, heavy and suffocating, as if the world itself had been muted. It had been 3 weeks since I lost my husband, Mark, and I still hadn't figured out how to exist without him. Every morning felt like a battle I had no strength to fight. The house, once alive with laughter and warmth, now felt empty, just a hollow shell of the life we had built together. With a heavy heart and an even heavier body, I forced myself out of bed. Sleep had become an elusive stranger, replaced by endless nights of staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of Mark. The way he used to hum while making breakfast. The way he'd sneak up behind me while I was cooking and wrap his arms around my waist. The way he whispered, "I love you," as if it were the easiest thing in the world. I made my way to the kitchen, deciding to at least brew some coffee, though I knew I probably wouldn't drink it. My appetite had disappeared along with my will to do much of anything. As I reached for the coffee maker, a sudden knock at the door jolted me. I hesitated. I wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors had become a rarity. Not that I blamed them. People never really know what to say to a grieving widow. They offer empty reassurances like, "If you need anything, let me know," but they don't actually expect you to ask. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door and pulled it open. Standing on the porch was my neighbor, Ben. He had lived next door with his wife, Sarah, until she lost her battle with cancer 2 years ago. I remembered how broken he had looked back then, how lost. And now, I understood that pain in a way I had never wanted to. In his hands, he held a plate of cookies. "Hey, Emily," he said gently. I made too many of these. Thought you might like some." I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the kindness. "You made these?" He let out a small chuckle. "Well, I won't lie, they're from a store-bought mix. But I did add extra chocolate chips." Something resembling a smile tugged at my lips, but it faded as quickly as it had come. I reached for the plate, my fingers brushing against his for just a moment. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Ben shifted on his feet, as if debating whether to say more. "Listen, I know how hard this is, and I know you probably don't want to talk. But if you ever need someone to just sit with, I'm right next door." I nodded, unable to find the right words. He didn't push for a response. He simply gave me a small nod before turning and walking back to his house. That was the first time I realized I wasn't as alone as I had thought. In the weeks that followed, Ben started stopping by more often, never uninvited, never overwhelming, just there. Sometimes Ben would drop off food. Other times, he would knock on the door and ask if I wanted to take a walk. At first, I turned him down, unwilling to step outside into a world that had moved on without Mark. But Ben never stopped asking. One afternoon, I found myself staring out the window at my backyard. It had once been Mark's pride and joy. He loved gardening, loved tending to the roses and trimming the hedges just right. Now it was overgrown. The grass had grown too long. The flowers were wilting. It looked how I felt, abandoned. I didn't even hear Ben come up behind me until he spoke. "Want some help with that?" I turned, startled. He was standing just outside the open sliding door, hands in his pockets, looking at the mess of a yard. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't even know where to start. He stepped inside, nodding toward the garden. "How about we start with the roses?" I should have said no. I should have told him I wasn't ready. But for some reason, I nodded. For the next several hours, we worked side by side. He trimmed the bushes while I pulled weeds. He made small talk, but never about Mark, never about grief, unless I brought it up. And when I did, he listened, really listened. As the sun started to set, we sat on the porch, exhausted but satisfied with the work we had done. For the first time in weeks, the yard looked alive again. I let out a shaky breath. "Thank you, Ben. I didn't realize how much I needed this." He gave me a soft smile. "It helps. Keeping busy, having a purpose. That's what got me through after Sarah." I turned to him, really looking at him. I had been so lost in my own pain that I had forgotten he had been through this too. "How did you do it?" I asked. "How did you keep going?" His eyes darkened slightly, his jaw tightening. "Honestly, I didn't want for a long time. I just existed. But then one day, I realized Sarah wouldn't have wanted that for me. She would have wanted me to live, to find happiness again. I looked down at my hands, his words sinking in. Would Mark want the same for me? I knew the answer. Of course he would. But knowing it and feeling ready to accept it were two very different things. A few days later, Ben knocked on my door again. This time, he held a small, folded piece of paper. I wasn't sure if I should show you this, he said, handing it to me. Curious, I unfolded it, my breath catching as I recognized Mark's handwriting. Ben, I don't know if I'll ever need to ask this favor of you, but if something happens to me, please check it on Emily. She's strong, but she'll need someone to remind her of that. You've been through this, so you understand. Please, just make sure she's okay. Thank you, my friend. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the note to my chest. Mark had thought of me, even in death. And Ben, he had honored that request without hesitation. I looked up at him, my voice trembling. You didn't have to do this. His gaze softened. Yes, I did. At that moment, something shifted inside me. Grief didn't disappear overnight, and I knew I had a long road ahead. But for the first time since losing Mark, I felt something other than pain. I felt gratitude. Ben wasn't just my neighbor. He had become my lifeline. And somehow, through all the sorrow, I knew that one day I would be okay.